Howdy, everybody, and welcome to the Oklahoma Faith Network's panel on interfaith organizing and collaboration in Oklahoma, the Religions United panel for the month of May. Thank you all for joining us, whether you're joining us live or watching us later on. My name is Tim Atkins, and I serve as the Director of Lifespan Religious Exploration at the First Unitarian Church of Oklahoma City, a member of the Religions United panel of the Oklahoma Faith Network, and now I'm on the board of the Oklahoma Faith Network, and I'm pleased to be there. And so I firmly believe that interfaith organizing is the only way we can make lasting change here in Oklahoma. And so I'm excited to hear from some of our experts in Oklahoma around doing interfaith work, to hear about some of the challenges and successes they've had over the past year, and what we can all do to help support interfaith organizing here in Oklahoma. And so I'm going to invite our panelists to kind of give a personal introduction about how they got to where they are. And then we're going to learn about the different organizations being represented here at this table. And so I'd like to go ahead and invite Emilee Bounds from Action. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Thank you for joining us, Emilee.
Thanks, Tim. So my name is Emilee Bounds. I'm the senior organizer with Action in Tulsa. I have been doing this work for about 10 years and found it as a new member of Mayflower Congregational UCC in Oklahoma City. Was actually working on a PhD and heading for a life in academia when I decided to blow all of that up and become an organizer. A big thing that launched me into broad-based, nonpartisan organizing was I ran my dad's campaign for state representative in 2016 as a part of the teacher caucus. He was a Democrat running in a predominantly Republican district, and we organized teachers really better than almost anybody in the state. And we lost as if we hadn't knocked a single door. That caused me to really reevaluate how we interact with politics and lean into broad-based organizing through my faith community.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that story. Appreciate it. Let's move to Reverend Dr. Shannon Fleck. Welcome, Shannon.
Hello, thank you. Well, I'm Shannon Fleck, and I really came to the interfaith world unexpectedly through a question during my ordination council, my interview to be ordained. I was asked, well, how do I feel about other religious traditions? And I really hadn't studied it in seminary or spent any time thinking about it. And then I was put on the hot seat in front of this committee. And what came out of my mouth was, I feel like I am a Christian because of where I was born. And if I had been born somewhere else on the globe, I would probably be practicing a different religious tradition, and that would not make me wrong. So that was kind of the audible exacting of my belief that I hadn't really tapped into before. So following that, I decided to get a little bit more engaged. So I've done interfaith volunteering, activism, organizing for 12 years now at this point in multiple states. So glad to be here.
Well, that's interesting. We have time at the end. I will ask you about differences between doing this work in Oklahoma and other states. Yes. And now I'd like to invite Aliye to introduce themselves. Aliye with the TMM.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a joy to be with friends, among friends, my good troublemaking friends, as I call it. So born and bred Okie, and like Emilee, I was in the education realm. I was a professor in one of our local colleges here for a while. And prior to me becoming an identifiable Muslim, interfaith work was just things that we cooperated with and collaborated with other organizations. And I volunteered over the past 30 years, but it wasn't really a passion or work that I did. So when I became identifiably Muslim back in 2004, and I started facing a lot of hate and discrimination and had been attacked on multiple occasions, I was like, okay, we got to do a systemic change. We got to figure out how we're going to implement some systemic change. And that's when I became pretty active in our community. And, starting from training law enforcement to doing presentations and so on and so forth, and sitting on different boards across the city and the state, and just work my way up that ladder of nonprofit. And here I am 20 years later, the executive director, the second female executive director of an 86-year-old interfaith organization. So short and sweet.
Well, and that is the perfect segue to my next question, which is, what is your organization that's been around for 70 to 80 years? Please describe and also please try, if you're going to use an acronym, please say out what the acronym means.
Absolutely. So TMM is Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry. TMM started in 1937 as the Tulsa Council of Churches. It was an all Protestant organization when it started. And then in 1961, it became radical and decided it was going to become ecumenical and start working with our Catholic brothers and sisters when that was the big taboo thing. In the early 70s, it started working with the Jewish community. In the late 80s and early 90s, it started working with the Muslim community. And now we welcome everybody from all spiritual realms at Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry. And so it has an amazing history of using our faith community to find the gaps in our society in Tulsa or in Oklahoma, and working together to strengthen those gaps. So when it came to addressing the homelessness, we started the Tulsa Day Center for the Homeless. When it came to runaway youth, the Youth Services of Tulsa was started by Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry. Meals on Wheels for our neighbors that can't get out and get sustenance or nutrition. The Retired Senior Volunteer Program was started by TMM. The Martin Luther King Parade was started by TMM. Recently, I just found out that we helped start the Tulsa Mental Health Association. So several of these organizations were started by our faith communities in Oklahoma. So we know that we are in the Bible Belt, and we know that we are the buckle of that Bible Belt. And so we know that our faith leaders wield quite a bit of power. And so we get to harness that for good and bring everybody together. And our motto is that we don't have to believe alike to love alike at TMM, at Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry. And so it works wonderfully. We respect mutually and we love equally. And we still get to hold that diversity and celebrate that diversity and work together for the betterment of our community.
Well, that's lovely. Is your organization set up to where like individual houses of worship join? And so it's like a collection of houses of worship all working together?
Yes. So we have individual houses of worship, and our board is made up of faith leaders from all vast walks of life. And we also have other organizations that have joined that aren't necessarily houses of worship. They do work in the faith realm, but they also do work within the community. So, and we also have individual membership as well. So we just, wherever we're needed, we try to come together. We work with Action, we work with Oklahoma Faith Network and so on and so forth. Wherever we're needed, we work together. We try to play that Lego piece. We're that connector. So we're able to bring our faith leaders to figure out a solution to whatever problem we have.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
That was great. All right. I also want to lift up the importance of the individual memberships for folks who may be attending a faith community or not a faith community at all, but want to support interfaith work. Many of these organizations, and if the organizations in this room can, please say so, have individual memberships where you as an individual can help support the interfaith organizing these amazing organizations are doing. And so you may get inspired and want to join one of these at some point during our session today. So let's move to Reverend Dr. Shannon Fleck. Would you like to tell us something about the OFN?
Yeah. OFN used to be known as the Oklahoma Conference of Churches. And so if you're here, you're probably seeing a link on our social media or YouTube page that says formerly OCC, because this is still a brand new name change that we're growing into over this next year. We did just celebrate 50 years in November. Woo! So we were founded in 1972 as a Christian ecumenical organization, similar to what Aliye was discussing. And over the years, just naturally, as with TMM grew into something bigger and more broad and became inclusive of all religious traditions, as well as secular organizations who want to be a part of the work. And there's a lot of those. And just as you were saying, Tim, the level of individuals who are now becoming involved is growing, which is exciting. And I think that's akin to, we're seeing a lot of people who have been hurt and distraught by a lot of faith communities. And everybody's journey is different, but we find a lot of individuals looking for this voice here in Oklahoma. And so they're drawn to organizations like Action, like TMN, like OFN, because we're doing something different here in a state that kind of shouts very loudly certain ideals that aren't necessarily unilateral across the board. So the Oklahoma Faith Network mission statement is to connect, motivate, and empower communities of faith in Oklahoma. It's just that simple. And just like Aliye described it as a Lego, which I love, I usually describe it as like a link, like a paper clip, some image like that, trying to connect faith issues to secular issues and vice versa to try and fill these gaps in our communities. But also another goal of ours is very much to recreate the faith narrative in Oklahoma to be more inclusive and loving and accepting of all people of faith, and that the faith voice is not unilateral here in the state of Oklahoma. You're muted, Tim, although I'm sure you sound great.
Oops.
There you go.
I think it might be the first time I've made that mistake on one of these calls. Well, thank you. And I am very excited to hear about the broadening of the Oklahoma Faith Network, especially as a Unitarian Universalist. We always love that. So thank you. And I would love to hear more about Action. Emilee, I'm not sure I know what Action stands for.
Yeah, so Action stands for Allied Communities of Tulsa Inspiring Our Neighbors. Our neighborhoods rather, and Action was founded in 2013 by an interfaith board of faith leaders in Tulsa who had experienced organizing in some other community where they were serving. Action is an organization that is made of institutions, primarily congregations and other faith organizations, but not exclusively faith-based organizations. We also work with workers' unions and parent organizations and other nonprofits as well. We are affiliated with the Industrial Areas Foundation that was founded in 1940 by Saul Alinsky. The original IAF organization was the Back of the Yards on the south side of Chicago. We have evolved a bit from our Alinsky origins, and we call the founder of the modern day IAF Ernesto Cortez in the 1970s in San Antonio. So we are a part of a larger network of organizations who trains organizers and leaders. The purpose of Action is to build power and to build institutional power to hold elected officials accountable to the people, not just the organized money that we know is running our state right now. So that is a little bit about us.
Thank you. Thank you all. Wow, got some great folks, great organizations in the room. Been looking forward to this panel. So let's start off with a positive. I would love to hear what's one success that you've had this year with your work doing interfaith organizing here in Oklahoma. What's like one success you want to just shout from the rooftops? Let's start with you, Shannon. Haven't started with you yet.
Yeah. One success we've had is, just in the last year. So I'm limiting. So just in the last year, we're seeing a lot of the diminishing of the separation of church and state here in the state of Oklahoma. There's a lot of efforts to essentially eliminate the wall that is supposed to separate those two entities. And one of the things we were able to do was our state superintendent, Mr. Ryan Walters, wanted to implement or received a letter from a group of 6 pastors, only 6 pastors, sent him a letter urging him to put prayer back in public schools. Well, as interfaith professionals, we know what prayer is going to look like in public schools, and it's not going to be inclusive of all faith perspectives or voices, and it's just a rabbit hole to go down. So in less than a week, we collected over 100 signatures and sent that on to Ryan Walters saying we are not we're not interested in this. As faith leaders, we do not want this to happen. So he had 6 pastors urging that, and we had quite a response pretty quickly to him. And that's a testament to just our ability to come together very quickly. So I would call that a success.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Trying to pull off a quick response, we all know that can be a challenge.
Yes.
Absolutely. It takes a lot of infrastructure that's already in place to be able to pull off a quick, rapid response.
Yeah. And Aliye was out of the country, or her name would have been on that. I know. you were across the pond, as they say.
I was in Turkey, but I had representatives like Chris Moore and several others that signed on in lieu of in lieu of my name for TMM. So, and he texted me. I was like, yes, go ahead. Yeah, we were good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right, Emilee, what's a success that Action has had over the past year?
So I moved to become the senior organizer with Action in February of 2021 after organizing in Texas for a period of time. And what we really wanted to do was reorganize. All organizing is disorganizing and reorganizing. And we really wanted to understand what pressures families were facing as we were coming out of the pandemic, and to rebuild a new agenda of issues for us to work on in the coming years. And so in October of 2022, I don't know what year it is, we launched a 1,000 Conversation campaign where we had 1,000 conversations in institutions across Tulsa. And from those conversations, we built an agenda of issues that was then ratified in February by an assembly of 150 delegates in a bilingual space representing 17 institutions. It was a really impressive room with a lot of energy, and people agreed to work on mental health and education, housing and tenant rights, local infrastructure and lighting, community safety and gun violence, and then also driver's licenses for all taxpayers.
Gosh, 1,000 conversations to help build an agenda is an amazing feat.
Thank you. So it was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Aliye, what's a success that the Tulsa Metropolitan Ministries, did I get that right? Woohoo!
Yes.
What's a success that y'all have had this year?
Yes. Well, we tried something new this year that we hadn't tried before with the amount of gun violence that we are noticing. Tomorrow marks the anniversary of the shooting at St. Francis Hospital. Many of my board members came together and we were like, what can we do about gun violence? What do we need to do? One of my board members, who is a retired Methodist minister, attended a gun buyback program in Colorado. So we had never experienced something like that here in Tulsa. And we started working together trying to figure out how that was going to look. In November, we put together a gun buyback program. I'm not going to lie, I was a little skeptical. I didn't think that we would have more than 3-4 people show up. And on a freezing Saturday morning, we already had people in line before the gun buyback program started at 10 o'clock in the morning. And we bought back $13,000 worth of long guns and handguns and bullets. So we were giving $200 gift cards for long guns, rifles, shotguns, and we bought one AR-15 back. Yes. And then we were giving $100 for handguns. And the bigger part of this program was that we're not anti-gun. We are pro-gun safety, right? We want you to safely and properly store your guns and do whatever you need to do. But the bigger part of this was we brought our veterans in to help us, who are also a group of blacksmiths that were able to handle the weapons. Then they personally chopped the weapons right there. They destroyed the weapons. And then we took these weapons and we melted them down in a forge. Later on in February, we had an interfaith ceremony where we had victims come and victims' families who were able to come. And as we put some of the pieces in the forge, they were able to hammer and take out their frustrations and call out the names of the victims. And then those guns were turned into garden tools. So we presented these families and victims with these garden tools so they can plant seeds of hope. And that was our first one. And so we are now planning to have these annually in different parts of the city. We partnered with our city. We partnered with our law enforcement. We partnered with our veterans. We partnered with our faith community. And, amazingly, we had a little bit of opposition with some of our, as as we know that we would have in Oklahoma. But I was shocked that that's all the opposition that we had. So that was just one of our minor little successes that we had this year. That was, that's really exciting to us.
I question your use of the term minor.
Yeah.
The saying.
I say minor, but a hijabi woman with an AR-15, like, come on now. I mean, just looking at that was, just enough as we were handling, these guns that were coming through. And so it was very healing. I will say it was extremely healing.
It's a beautiful ritual you all came up with the garden.
Many of our friends, many of our families have been affected, whether it's suicide, whether it's, whatever it is, by some form of gun violence. And every day, you turn on the news and you hear somebody else's life has been taken by a gun, right? And as I travel overseas, as I travel to all these different countries, people are just baffled at how we have access to weapons here. And, the amount of lives that we lose every year in the United States to gun violence. And so really, we were just blown away by the response, and they're already asking us when the second one will be taking place. So we're getting ready to have the second one in the fall. So we are very, very excited.
Wow, these are some incredibly inspiring stories. I'm feeling already more energized than I was at the beginning of the call. So thank you all. And of course, as with every success comes multiple challenges of doing interfaith organizing anywhere, but especially in Oklahoma. And so I would love to hear about what's a challenge or two that you faced over the past year or a couple of years. I don't need exact calendar time frame there. But what's a challenge that you've noticed out there that you've faced? And you don't need to have a solution to the challenge or anything like that. Just kind of getting a state of what's going on out there. So what are some of the challenges that you're seeing out there? Let's start with you, Emilee.
So what I didn't tell you about our 1,000 conversations was really the biggest thing that we learned is that no matter how much money you make, what part of town you live in, where you worship, the color of your skin, any of our differences, the language that you speak, the number one issue that we heard about was the presence of loneliness. People in Tulsa are lonely, and I would assume that that extends to the entire state of Oklahoma. We then spoke with our fire department, and they echoed the same thing that they're seeing, that many of the calls that these first responders are seeing are really the source is loneliness. And whenever we're talking about organizing and mobilizing a constituency around issues, those relationships are important. And we found that the congregations and institutions that we're working with today are not the same institutions that we were working with in February of 2020. We had longtime established members saying, I don't know the people that I am sharing the pews with. And then you have young families coming into these institutions saying, I don't know anybody. So the presence of loneliness, the breakdown of the fabric of social life, those lack of rubbing elbow times over a 2-3 year span really, I think, did a lot of damage to our communities. And so rebuilding that social fabric, rebuilding those relationships, also in a time where we are more polarized than I would argue ever, where we are afraid of the other, where we are thinking that everybody is going to be yelling at us or oppositional. That has been the greatest barrier that we've faced. But at the same time, in relational broad-based organizing, that's really our greatest opportunity, is teaching the art of relationships. We're actually building a tenant association in Tulsa, the United Tenants of Tulsa. And we pulled together these tenants for a relational meeting training. It was an 1.5 hour long training. And usually whenever you have an 1.5 hour long training, people are ready to get out the door. 30 minutes later, I finally had to go, and my tenant organizer stuck around until an hour later. They were so hungry for connection, and we were providing the space for that we finally, an hour after an 1.5 hour long training went on, we were able to get people out of the door. So it is a great barrier, but it's also a great opportunity.
I never would have expected loneliness as an answer to that question. So thank you, Emilee. You've given me something to ponder and think about. Really. Aliye, what's a challenge that you've noticed from your perspective at the Tulsa TMM?
So, Emilee touched on it a little bit, is this polarization. We have more polarization now than we've ever experienced, ever. Even with 9/11, there's more polarization now. And this othering, we call it the othering, this fear mongering that we're seeing. I mean, we saw what happened at the Capitol. We're just seeing this over and over and over again. And this constant, pointing, and they can't even put a face to their fear. And so this polarization, this othering, it's just dividing everybody and just trying to bring people together. I mean, I can't tell you on how many occasions when I go to meet somebody, people are like, well, they're not going to talk with you. They're not going to talk with some white Muslim lady, That's an evangelical organization, or they're a conservative Christian organization, or they're an Orthodox Jewish, organization. They're going to speak with you. And, let me tell you how many times I've proved people wrong. I'm like, we're just having a conversation. They're human just like me. They're a parent. They work here. They pay bills. They pay taxes. We're all contributing parts of the society just like me. So why wouldn't they? Right. And yes, on a couple of occasions, it took a little bit of time. And once we're able to set those boundaries and figure out that we have to have mutual respect to have conversations, hey, I'm the only Muslim that I know of that serves on a Church of Christ board, right? And some of my other Christian friends, like my more liberal friends, are like, what the hell, Aliye? Like, you? Like, really? Seriously? And so it's definitely that polarization. And so allowing grace, giving people grace and having those conversations, even when they come at you. So there's been a bazillion times where people have come at me and have called me a terrorist and a this and a that and the other and all these other things. And then just a little bit of conversation, by the end of the day, that person turns out to be just your neighbor, So about 12 years ago, I had a conversation with a gentleman who thought I was a terrorist and I supported ISIS and this and that and the other. And he's been the security guard at the mosque for 12 years now. The same guy that hated Muslims. So,
So thank you. We've heard about loneliness and polarization. And Shannon, from OFN, in your perspective, what's one of the bigger challenges that you're facing in Oklahoma?
If I had to make it concise, I would say the incessant need to be right. That's just this baiting need, and it knows no boundaries. It's universal to humanity, but this need to be the one true and correct narrative across the board, that is such a barrier. Yeah, to everything that we could possibly have. If we could just get past that need to be correct and to make other people feel the way we feel, it would be just a lot more harmonious. But what we are experiencing is people who don't want to talk to each other. And on the flip side of that, and more importantly, is also people don't want to listen to one another. We really struggle opening our ears and hearing what people have to say. I spoke to a group of young women on Sunday, and when I was talking to them, I said, you cannot disagree with someone without listening to them. Otherwise, you're just like, you don't get the right to disagree unless you've heard what that person has to say and really listen to it. And we've really skipped over that in a lot of ways. And a lot of this work has to do with having that dialogue. And as Aliye said, sitting down with people who, may hate you, or people may think they're going to hate you, but being willing to show up and listen to them. Because I'd say 8 to 9 times out of 10, just really actively listening to someone's voice really helps mend brokenness. And so if we could all just make a bit of a bigger commitment to doing that, rather than just, nope, you're this or you're that, and I don't want any part of it, we're never going to get anywhere. So that remains a top challenge.
Absolutely. I see something similar from where I serve as well. Shannon, the needing for more humility and the allowance that it's okay to be unsure and to change your mind when you have new information, yes, fully agreed. And so kind of on the same vein, we've heard about some of the biggest challenges, and I want to talk a little bit about kind of I don't know, the state of Oklahoma, I guess you can think of it, is that, I would love to hear, you all have a wide reach and also a deep reach in our communities. And so I would love to hear from these experts in the room, what are some of the needs facing our Oklahoma communities that may not be getting a lot of attention in the media or in the common consciousness right now, that could really use a good lifting up and could use some more attention paid to it? Does that question make sense? All right, I'm seeing some nods. So, Aliye, I'm going to consider that a raised hand. Sorry. And so I'm going to invite you to go first.
Sorry, I was waving bye to my son who's taking out the door.
Blame your son for going first then. It's fine.
That's right. It's all good. It's all good. So back in 2017, one of my board members, Dr. Kathy LaFortune, brought to our attention that a lot of our children in Oklahoma were being trafficked, human trafficked. And that unfortunately, we only have one facility that has 8 beds and it only serves girls. And it is constantly full. That is DHS licensed, certified, and contracted in the entire state of Oklahoma. We have no beds for boys. We have no beds for our LGBTQ trans youth. And so we started doing our research. Last year, we were able to acquire 160 acres. We're going through that process of rezoning our property now. And we've been doing a lot of research, working with consultants to hopefully be the first facility in the entire state of Oklahoma to be a quality residential treatment facility for all youth in Oklahoma. So we'll have 16 beds in our first facility, in a phase 1 of our facility. So that's kind of something that we really don't hear about. When you talk about human trafficking, people think about the movie Taken. They think some Eastern European mafia group is coming in here and nabbing our kids and leaving. And that doesn't happen in Oklahoma. When in actuality, about 75% of the trafficking that goes on in the state of Oklahoma is actually done by family members. It's familial trafficking. So they have their fathers, their mothers, their, uncles, whoever trafficking these children. And it's not just children, adults as well. And so that's something that really doesn't get a lot of attention in Oklahoma, regardless if it's labor trafficking or sex trafficking, human trafficking across the board. So that's something that we've been lifting up a lot. And a second project that we've been working on that's also not getting a lot of attention is food deserts. And people who are facing poverty and who aren't able to get nutritional sustenance. And so we've been working on a project to put a frictionless grocery store in these food deserts. They're about the size of a Quick Trip, about 1,500, 1,600 square feet. They'll be running on vending machines. Essentially, it'll be large vending machines. And we're connecting with our Oklahoma farmers to put nutritional food in these vending machines that will be packaged in biodegradable packaging, and they'll be able to use their SNAP benefits. And outside we'll have hot vending machines that'll vend free meals to children. So the pilot area that we selected is in between 2 schools and a library. So people can just walk to this area and it'll serve that community. And so we're very excited, and we're getting ready to announce the groundbreaking of that project as well, the Bazaar project. So those are just 2 of the topics that we're working on that aren't really getting a lot of attention in Oklahoma.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. And if someone is interested in helping support the, for example, the Human Trafficking Care Treatment Center, how can they help support that?
They can either donate, they can get in touch with us, they can see, they can volunteer, there's a plethora of ways that they can help be a part of that project. So they just need to get in touch with us at Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry, tmmtulsa.org. And there you go.
All right. Because I know we have some people who will want to get involved with some of these projects they're hearing about.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
So Shannon, what is a community or an area or an issue need that you're seeing out there that may not be getting a lot of attention?
It's really hard to choose one, Tim. Choosing one is a struggle. I did get an email recently from a gentleman who was highlighting, though, the huge gap in attention being paid to our elderly community. And I think it goes without saying that is a community that often gets forgotten and overlooked. We saw a lot of that atrocity during the pandemic, even with the the state of our nursing home care and our facilities and our forgotten family members. And so that's something that I want to acknowledge out loud, because that is an issue that needs more organizing around and more attention paid to it. And in the same regard, we're really focused on uplifting families right now, whatever that looks like. Any kind of family, grown-ups and kids, doesn't matter any other details. And so we're putting on a program called Strengthening Families here in the state of Oklahoma that's really, it spends 14 weeks with a group of families and goes through a curriculum to help strengthen that unit. This has been especially important post-COVID. I know in my house, it changed the nature of my relationship with my daughter when she was here all the time. And I had to navigate her school and my job all from home. And the stress that the pandemic has put on our family units, I think we're just now beginning to process that a little bit more. And so we're also trying to just pay attention to the family unit and how do we strengthen that, make sure families are getting what they need to be successful as they go forward. So I would say those are two. The family, which if you look at our legislative priorities here at the state, families are not prioritized in the bills being passed at all. Same with elder care. There have been a few attempts in the past few years to pass some really great laws, but they don't get anywhere. And so that's another thing to be mindful of when we do advocacy, is that our laws are not reflecting a priority in our people who are vulnerable and who need protection. Still muted, Tim. I think I'm doing it.
It's you. It is clearly it's you. All right. So, Emilee, from your perspective up in Tulsa, what are some areas in Oklahoma that could use some sustained help from faith-based groups right now?
I found this to be a challenging question to think about. And I think the first thing that I'd like to say is our own selves. I think that we have to point our fingers right back into our chest, understand our biases, understand our grief, our anger, and what's going on with us. What is our story? I think that's the first thing, because we have to understand our own story in order to be in relationship with others. Now, the next thing is something that we worked on this last legislative session. It was Senate Bill 669 that allowed driver's licenses for all people in the state of Oklahoma who pay taxes. There's a segment of our population who pays taxes in Oklahoma, but is not allowed a driver's license. This bill had bipartisan support from law enforcement. It had support from farmers, the Farm Bureau, the Cattlemen's Association, Oklahoma Policy Institute, OCPA, and undocumented immigrants. When do we see something like that? If we are able to get people who have been paying taxes but are not eligible for a driver's license, this driver's license, it will lower our insurance premiums because of we have a high uninsured motorist rate. Law enforcement are in favor of this because they want everybody to know the rules of the road, and they want everybody to be able to have car insurance. And then whenever we think of our rural communities, farmers know who their workers are. So I think individuals who are not eligible for driver's licenses are people that we should invest in relationships with. Now, the other part of this is a lot of times these people speak a different language than we do. And there are ways that we can build relationships across language barriers. It is difficult, but it does require that humility. It requires just taking a shot, attempt to speak a different language to connect with other human beings.
All right, thank you. And so we've heard a lot about some of the issues facing our state, some of the issues facing interfaith organizing in our state. And so I would love to hear, with organizing, it's always you're always doing something. right? You've always got plans for the upcoming week, month, year, and all sorts of new programming ideas and things you want to try. So what's something in your hopper, whether it's coming up this year or soonish, that you are personally kind of geeking out about with excitement, that you are excited to see make happen, right? Let's start with Emilee for this question. Emilee, what is something that you've got coming up or action has coming up that you're really excited about?
So last month we launched the United Tenants of Tulsa. It is the first first tenant association in Tulsa. And so we're really excited to be building that. We do have action teams that are meeting monthly to do research actions, to do civic academies. We'll be building towards a training coming up, an organizing training in January. And then also just the constant institutional development that we're doing with our congregations and local institutions. And so those are scheduled as needed, but those are the things we're really excited about.
All right, that's great. Thank you. Aliye, what are you in TMM excited about over the upcoming years?
So I've already mentioned our quality residential treatment facility for our juveniles in Oklahoma. I've mentioned our Bazaar project, which is our frictionless grocery store for food deserts. Another huge project that we're working on is reinstituting a park that was taken away about 20 years ago, so 2 decades ago, from a community at 36th Street North, where they, over 100 kids don't have access. The closest park to them, the closest playground is about 5 to 6 miles away. We worked with the city and with the faith community and some other people in that area to hopefully rebuild this new playground. And once our law enforcement is able to remove all the evidence out of the gym that's there, the existing gym, we're going to demolish that and turn it into a large interfaith community center. And so we're getting ready to break ground on that project as well. So we're kind of geeking out about that. So
absolutely, with good reason too. Yes,
yes, very much so.
And Shannon, what's the OFN geeking out about these days?
Everything. we are proud of our geeking around OFN, but a lot going on. There's always a lot going on. We, in addition to doing the Strengthening Families work, we are working on an opioid stimulant prevention program that we've been doing for a couple of years now, but we're ramping it up and hoping to become like a naloxone or Narcan hub here in the next year so that faith communities can come directly to us to get that for their communities of faith, provide training for that. We're also providing trainings throughout the year to help faith communities better address addiction, help prevent addiction. Additionally, we're launching suicide prevention programming in the next year, which is very important, especially as we speak to the loneliness that Emilee mentioned, the populations of people just post-COVID. We really need to be in the business of taking better care of ourselves. And, something that I always geek out over every year is our Interfaith Youth Tour, which happens annually. We did not get to do that in person during COVID, but last year was our first year back in person for the Interfaith Youth Tour. We have to be approaching close to our 20th anniversary of this program, but I have lost track of where we're at. I need to land somewhere and see if we're close to 20 so we can make a big deal out of it. But we have renamed that program, and it is now being called the Rex Friend Interfaith Youth Tour. And that is named in dedication of one of our sensational supporters, board member, interfaith advocate, Rex Friend, who we lost this last year. And we really wanted to dedicate this event in his honor. That was a fantastic recommendation by our Religions United Committee. And so that is the official new name. That's coming up on September the 10th of this year. We're hoping to have even more kids than we had last year as we get back into the swing post-COVID.
Absolutely. I love all the events we can do to get youth working together from an interfaith perspective so they can carry those experiences and lessons throughout life. It's so important. So I love the Interfaith Youth Tour and doing interfaith youth work. We've got some really cool things happening in Oklahoma that I didn't know about. So I'm really now excited to hear about this. Yeah, speaking of Oklahoma, Shannon, you mentioned earlier that you have done this work in other states. And Emilee, you mentioned you came from Texas. Aliye, I have no idea if you've done this work in other states or not. I guess I could have asked, but sorry. But I am just curious. I moved to Oklahoma 3 years ago during the pandemic, summer of 2020. So I'd love to hear about your experiences doing interfaith work in Oklahoma versus maybe another state, and similarities or challenges or anything that you've just noticed throughout your time. And Shannon, let me go and start with you.
Sure. The only other place I've actively done the work on committees was in Arkansas. And I was a part of the Arkansas Interfaith Conference. You can hear my dog. He wants in here real bad. So the big thing that I noticed, and maybe it was just, I've learned why this is, and it's that the community here in Oklahoma is just so tight-knit, just very interwoven, very dedicated. It's not just like a once a month meeting that you go to. It is a all the time.
Lifestyle, really? Yeah.
It's a lifestyle. There it is. An actively chosen thing. Like, we are at each other's events. Look at Aliye and Emilee. We show up for one another's programs. We show up for one another's events. We're supporting one another. Mm-hmm. We know that this work cannot be done in any one silo. It really does take the work of all of us. And I don't think it's done as well elsewhere. Now, to be fair to Arkansas, I wasn't there long enough to get as intimate of an experience as I've had in Oklahoma. So anyone from Arkansas watching, I love you. North Little Rock, go Little Rock. But the experience here is very unique. And when I've spoken with people about why that is, they have almost unilaterally reflected it back to the Oklahoma City bombing. Because when that happened, the interfaith community was very much like forced together to defend one another, to care for one another, to show up for one another. Of course, members of our Muslim community were accused directly of that event immediately. So it was a mess, but it really forged a fire underneath the interfaith community here in this state that has lived on. And when there are national and international tragedies, we come together for vigils. We come together to pray. We come together to acknowledge, to just show up in all kinds of ways. And so Oklahoma is very unique and very special. And I think a lot of that has to do with our state tragedy, our history, and in that tragedy.
Yeah, I've noticed, I moved here from the East Coast in 2020, and I've noticed in my time here that the interfaith community has a lot of events, and you're always hearing about interfaith events from different groups. And it's just, in the previous places I've worked for Unitarian churches, it's never been at that top of consciousness like it is here, that there are lots of interfaith events and that we work on together as our own interfaith organizations. And there is that kind of community feel. I've noticed that as well. Emilee, have you noticed any differences between Oklahoma and Texas? I believe since I've moved to Oklahoma, I'm supposed to hate Texas now. So is there any bad stuff you need to say about interfaith organizing?
I enjoyed my time in Texas, but I am a native Okie. I think that is important to say. I'm from Yukon. So I organized in West Texas, Lubbock and Midland predominantly, and then also in Houston and south of Houston and Brazoria County. We were a part of a network of Texas organizations in all of the major cities and some of the mid-major cities in Texas. And the biggest difference that I see is in Oklahoma, things feel more possible. Now, we are very polarized. There is a supermajority in the legislature, but things are possible. Just like you all were saying, these are tight-knit communities. We have people in our metropolitan areas who are from places like Yukon, Chandler, Shakota. And so we have these roots often in rural Oklahoma. And I do believe the rural-urban divide is quite a false divide. I think we have much more in common than we know, but it benefits the power structure for us to think that we don't. So I feel that there is a lot of politics that is possible in the state of Oklahoma.
Oh, thank you for that hopeful message.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly needed today. And Aliye, do you have any thoughts about interfaith organizing in Oklahoma versus other parts of the country or world?
So, as I mentioned earlier, I am a native Okie. I've born and bred right here, 45 years. However, I've been working not just in Oklahoma, but in different states across the U.S., and I work internationally as well. So, they're always baffled to see that in Oklahoma we do interfaith work because they think everybody is evangelical in Oklahoma, and they're like, "What? You're able to do what now in Oklahoma?" And it's truly baffling to them. We also have the only multi-faith chaplain that's embedded at any family justice center around the world. We checked on that multiple times. There's many family justice centers across the U.S. and in 50 different countries, but we are the only one that has the one and only multi-faith one, right? Because our victims that walk in through those doors are not just Christian, right? Where else in Oklahoma is a rabbi going to call you, a conservative rabbi, an hour ago, to tell me that a Syrian refugee family is going to land at 10 o'clock? How am I going to get them a meal? And then we need to get them admitted to a hospital. So after I hop off of this call, I'm going to run a meal to the hotel to drop it off and then take one of those family members to a hospital to go meet with some other Muslim doctors in our community to help them translate and get her inpatient for her kidney care. I mean, where else does that happen, right? And so it's a blessing. Like Shannon said, it's a lifestyle here. I lovingly call it my interfaith family because we are so tight knit. We're able to, be literally a phone call or a text away whenever tragedy strikes, or whenever we're celebrating things and working together. Taking my grandkids and my kids to the Festival of Lights for the first night of Hanukkah, enjoying that at a synagogue, or, going to a church for a Christmas service or whatever, and then coming and enjoying iftar dinner at a Unitarian church. Come on, where do you do that, right? And so I know we have a lot of challenges. I know we have a lot of haters out there, but that just means we're just going to work harder, and, we're just going to keep going and keep plowing through, and just give Oklahoma that credit that we need to give it, that we have that Southern hospitality, I guess you can say. So I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful, especially with some of these collaborators, my good troublemakers, as I said earlier. Like Shannon said, we're always at each other's events, and whenever we need each other, we're a phone call or a text away. So it's wonderful. You're muted, Tim.
See, Shannon, it wasn't just you. All right. So I would love to end with a hopeful question and leave us with from a place of hope. And so, what are you hoping to see in Oklahoma over the next, let's say, 5 years, right? What is something that you're hoping to see develop, happen, change? What's something that or grow in Oklahoma? What are you hoping to see happen in Oklahoma over the next 3 to 5 years? If you've got one thing, you can share that one thing. If you've got a few things and can't pick, you can share a few things that you can't pick from. That's fine. All right. Let's go ahead and start this with Shannon again. Shannon.
There are a lot of snarky things popping into my brain, and I'm just subduing them in the moment because there's a lot of, I'm just going to say, leadership changes on the horizon for the state of Oklahoma in the next 3 to 5 years. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to say anything specific. I am just saying that we have changes in leadership available to us as a state in 3 to 5 years. And so that's very exciting. It always is to look forward to what could be. And I mean that in every possible level of government, every possible level of private organizations, of anything. It's hopeful to think about what could be. Also, as a piece of that, I am always hopeful that the narrative about what faith is in Oklahoma will evolve and change, because as Aliye said, everyone thinks that Oklahoma is evangelical and that that's all that's going on here in the state of Oklahoma. And it's just a constant goal I think for all of us, that we start to rewrite that narrative. So that's a huge one. So those are my probably top two in this one moment that you asked the question. But if you want to ask me again in half an hour, I might have more answers.
Of course,
That's just the nature of the question.
All right. Emilee, let's move to you next. What's something that you're hoping to see happen in Oklahoma over the next few years?
I hope to see us having an organized constituency that extends beyond the major cities in Oklahoma. We have organizations in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. I hope to see that extend to places like Stillwater, Lawton, Moore, Norman, possibly all the way down to Idabel. Because whenever we have that, when we know each other from these different communities, I want it to not be a surprise for legislators to see us coming in the door and having people who are reasonable, who are educated on the issues and able to negotiate so that the power does not just lie with organized money in the state of Oklahoma.
Well said. Preach. Let's make that happen. Yes. I know. Blossom all around. And Aliye, what is something that you're hoping to see happen in Oklahoma over the next few years?
So I agree with both of these rock stars that just, mentioned what they're hopeful for. I'm also hopeful for our youth. As I see my kids, as I see other youth that are growing and stepping into those leadership roles, that goes with that change of leadership. It goes with trying to bring everybody together. I'm really hopeful that they're going to bring change. They're going to be the ones that bring about change, because we've got some people who are just stuck in this archaic Neanderthal way of thought. Sorry. Okay, I'm not going to be snarky, but as we bring about change, I'm hopeful that our youth are hopefully going to be the ones. We're trying to pave that path for them, but I hope they're going to be that steamroller that comes through and really brings about that change.
Well, I think my biggest hope over the next few years would be that all Oklahomans start to really respect each other's faith trajectories and faith histories and faith journeys, right? Because I think we're starting to make progress there, and I think we have more to go. And the realization that what works for my family may not work for yours, and that's okay. Yours is just as equally valid as mine. So that's kind of my hope. I really want to thank you all for being here as part of this panel. And I want to thank you all, everyone who's watching either live or watching us later. This has been great. I really want to thank Reverend Dr. Shannon Fleck from the OFN, Emilee Bounds from Action Tulsa, and Aliye Shimi from Tulsa Metropolitan Ministries, TMM. I encourage everyone to go check out the websites and follow these groups on social medias, on Facebooks and Instagrams, or your social media of choice. Give them some likes. That really helps spread the message of the interfaith organizers and interfaith networks in our state. Share those posts. If you follow one of these interfaith groups and they post about an event, share it in your church's Facebook group, for example. Invite others to it as well. This is how we make change in Oklahoma, and it's been a blessing to be in a virtual room with these amazing change makers. So thank you all, and thank you all for joining us for this month's OFN Religions United panel, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you, and have a great year.
Thank you. Have a great evening.